March scopes of Japan are known for their high-end, high-performance optics, and this is their new March FX PRS Edition, a scope designed by a PRS competitor for PRS competitions. And we're going to see what makes this scope not only a match winner, but a game changer. I won't do a boring unboxing video. Instead, let's just take a look at the contents of the box. This is the March FX, and this is their 5-42 power scope. That's right, 5-42. Not only is it a high magnification, but a very wide range of magnification. This has a large 56mm objective for light gathering, and it also has a 34mm tube for a wide range of adjustments. And this is their new PRS edition of this scope, optimized for PRS competition. Notably, it has some really cool features like this silver band on all of the turrets here, and that's not just for aesthetics, it's also for readability, but also they're specially treated to allow you to write on them directly with a dry erase marker. So no longer do you have to wrap around your turrets with double stick tape and paper, whatever, to mark down your target notes. You can write it directly onto the turrets. That's really practical. And the parallax focus here doesn't have illumination, this edition of the scope, but it goes all the way down to 10 yards. So this makes it a usable scope for rimfire as well as airgun competitions, as well as centerfire. And our turrets, let's take a listen. Very audible, very tactile positive, with no slop in between the clicks. And each of the clicks is 1/10 of a mil. And this is resettable via these set screws at the top. You just loosen 2 of them, and that allows you to reset your zero once you have your reticle all zeroed out to your target. And it has a built-in zero stop. Once you have all that set up for your zero, you just turn this, as the Brits say, anti-clockwise until it locks into the turret and creates a very solid and repeatable zero stop. I've disabled it for now just so that we could check out our range of adjustments later. Now let's take a listen to our windage. Maybe even just a bit louder. Tactile positive, no slop in between the clicks, and again, 1/10 of a mil. And these also are resettable via the set screws on the top. Let's take a look at our magnification ring. Turns very smoothly. Has a little bit of a nub, not quite I would call a fin, but certainly gives you a little bit of extra leverage. They also sell a breakaway throw lever should you prefer to run it that way. And our diopter turns very smoothly, with markings for the corrections that you're dialing in here, and also has a locking ring for your diopter focus. But overall, this is a very beautiful piece, really fine engineering, fine milling and tolerances on all the details here, but I expect no less from March and their Japanese engineers. And this has the new FMLWBR turret, which was reticle designed by a competition PRS shooter, and we'll be taking a look at that later in the video. Well, as I'm editing this video, I am researching my next one with the help of this video's sponsor, Venice.ai. Now, a lot of people are using AI nowadays to help them with their writing, to do research, but forget an important thing: privacy. All of these AI companies, well, they store and they track that information. All of our search prompts, all of the results, including all the images that we've asked it to generate forever, because that's not creepy. But Venice AI is different because it encrypts all of our communication, and it doesn't store that communication history on its servers. It stores it on our browser so we can delete it if we need to. Try Venice for free. Use my link, venice.ai/Moondog, and get 20% off their Pro plan using code Moondog. Enjoy uncensored, private AI. Try Venice. We're looking through the March PRS at its lowest power of 5, at the peak of Mount Davidson, approximately 1,400 yards away. And we have the scope set at its lowest power of 5 to give our best overall view through the glass, and you compare the image you're seeing inside of the scope to that outside of the scope in the color of the sky, overall brightness, clarity, contrast, and color accuracy. And it is, with my naked eye through the lens, looks like a remarkably color accurate image, very high detail and contrast. And as we increase magnification, we are just going to introduce all of the faults in the glass. Now I'm going to stop this about halfway at 20 power. Just take a look at the top of the hill there. Still very sharp, clean image from center to the outer edge with no noticeable chromatic aberration. Now let's bring this all the way up to 42 power and take a look at what this looks like through the scope here. And the eye box got very narrow, but then again, any 42 power scope is going to have a very tight eye box. But we can easily see the trail marker sign at the top of the hill there. That is just the right and above the center crosshairs, and that is about a 3-foot-ish sign on top of a pole, which is a good proxy for an IPSC target at this distance. We're looking through the March FX PRS at its lowest power of 5 at our reference target's downrange at 100 yards. And I can tell you that with my naked eye, it's even more spectacular than with a camera. It's sharp from center to the outer edge, and the image is very color accurate, bright, clear, and sharp. And this is a good opportunity to check our range of adjustment, starting with our elevation. And that is the very topmost extent, and you can see a little bit of the eye box peeking in there at the top edge. In this scope, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, does have a tight eye box. And that is the very bottom. All right, let's bring this reticle back to 0 on the turret there. Now let's check out our windage. That is the rightmost, and that is the leftmost. All right, let's dial this back to 0 on the turret. And let's bring up our magnification now and take a look. Typically our sweet spot is halfway, so let's stop at 20 power and take a look at scope image now. Since we're lined up roughly to that corner highlight on that grid target, let's do a box test. I'm going to dial in 2 mils on our elevation and then dial in 2 mils on our windage. Dial back that turret to 0 on our elevation and dial back the 0 on to our turret. Now this is an opportunity to do a more of abusive test on these turrets and see if they'll come back to 0. This is my buddy Cyclops Joe's legendary nipple twister test. I'm just going to turn the heck out of these turrets for a good 20-30 seconds. See if they'll come back to their starting point. Alright, let's turn this back to factory 0. And actually, we're not too far from 0 on our windage. There we are. Now let's bring up our magnification all the way to its maximum of 42. And let's see that target there. And you can see immediately there, because it's so sharp, I can already see on the paper target on the bottom left, I can make out 2 22 caliber holes below our reactive sticker target quite clearly. And in the resolution chart on the bottom right, I can make out both horizontal and vertical lines all the way down to element 2 or even 3 in group 0, that's approaching spotting scope, 60 power spotting scope territory. Now, one of the interesting things about the scope is this traditional reticle, the WBR. Now, I'm sure one of the comments that some of you may have is, why does the PRS edition of this scope not have a Christmas tree reticle? Well, I got a chance to speak to the designer of this reticle and the PRS edition of the March FX, Brandon Rudge.
Yeah, so I think if you look in the PRS at most of the shooters, especially in the upper echelon of shooters, and internet, that this is a general statement. This is not a fit everybody bill here, but most individuals in the PRS, I think, are using less and less of the tree. We use a lot of holdovers and hold unders and stuff like that, but generally speaking, you're not going to find very many PRS guys that are actually using a tree, that in that fashion. The ability to hit targets based on that usage case, it just isn't practical for being successful in PRS as far as trying to hold both windage and elevation on a tree that 98% of the time is not going to be where you need it to be from a hold perspective. So too much guessing game, not enough certainty into the the outlook for, the output for the execution of the shot. So we did a little segment at SHOT Show, and we jokingly called it, chopping the trees, because we got that question a lot, and you see all sorts of individuals at SHOT Show. You see, pro level PRS guys, and you see guys that are at SHOT Show that have never even seen a PRS rifle. So you get a plethora of questions. And we basically had some guys in a tree, and I would go mark the turrets, and I'd say, okay, I took my phone out. We did a ballistic calculator on an actual PRS rifle, one of mine, and said, okay, let's pick some targets. You pick the distances, you tell me what you want to do. And we did. We picked, 4 or 5 targets, and we put all the information out there for an execution on the shot. And, I marked the turrets like I would for a PRS model, and we handed them a pin on an iPad, and we said, hey, okay, here's a reticle. You pick. What do you shoot? What reticle do you want this to be? And we would pull the reticles up for them. And basically what they rapidly found is they can't possibly hold it as fast as I can dial it, especially with the writable turrets.
And just in case you still want a Christmas tree, March does offer 2 different reticle options with Christmas trees for the scope. And check out the link in this video's description for my full interview with Brandon. Thanks for sticking around till the end of this video, and if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell buttons, which are free, by the way. You don't get charged a subscription fee to subscribe to this channel, so thanks for taking a moment to do that. And I'd like to thank March Scopes for sending out the FX PRS Edition and this Area 419 mount for me to test, which is an excellent mount, by the way. It comes pre-lapped, it has an alignment pin. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me review this mount. But I'd also like to thank Brandon for taking a moment to talk to me about the design decisions that went into creating this scope. As a pro competition shooter, it was his insights. Like, he suggested putting writable turrets on here, which is such a simple but brilliant feature. I'm sure it's going to be ripped off and copied by every other scope maker out there. It was also his decision to drop the illumination from the scope, and that was because he wanted to have the reticle as thin as possible. And it didn't occur to me, but to have an illuminated reticle, you actually have to make it thicker to add that reflectivity to it. So this is the first focal plane reticle, and when you increase your magnification all the way up to 42, that reticle gets not just bigger but thicker. So to keep it as thin as possible, the compromise was to remove the illumination. Also, and it was his decision, well, he designed this reticle, and he removed the Christmas tree, because, as he said, competition shooters don't use Christmas trees for holdovers. They make their adjustments on the turrets, which makes sense. But why is it everybody seems to want to buy a scope with a Christmas tree? Do you actually use your Christmas tree on your scope for holdover, or is it a marketing thing where everybody else has a Christmas tree on their reticle, so I have to have one? Let me know in the comments about that. But, all scopes are a bit of a compromise in one way or another to achieve a goal. For example, this is a rather heavy scope, and that is because they chose to make this tube so much thicker. This is a 4mm thick tube, which is like double the thickness of comparable scopes out there. But that is to give it extra strength, extra rigidity, and durability. This thing is built like a tank. This scope also has a rather tight eye box, maybe not tighter than other exotic scopes out there like the Collis, but I found it to be a rather tight eye box. But the compromise is that this has a wider field of view than other scopes out there, and it has a larger magnification range. It goes all the way from 5 to 42. Also, the Japanese Super ED glass in here really is super in terms of super sharp, super clear, super bright. So yeah, this is optically worth every penny, and it is a pretty penny with a street price over $4,000. It is out of my budget, but maybe it's not out of your budget. If you're interested in picking one up, check out my full written review at moondogindustries.com, and you'll find a link to that article in this video's description. Use the affiliate links you'll find on my website to help support my channel, and of course you can always help support my efforts by sharing this video on your socials and the forums that you frequent. Well, I gotta box this sucker up, unfortunately, but thanks for taking the time to watch this video. God bless. Moondog out. Hey, I'd like to know what you thought of this video. Leave me a comment or chat with me on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, MeWe, Instagram, or Locals. And if you want to see all of my videos, go to moondogindustries.com.